Hey guys, welcome to part 2 of the RPG Combat Tutorial Series. In this one I'm going to be talking about different types of defense. There's both physical and spell resist style defense, and that way if you're getting hit by a melee class you want to absorb physical damage, and if you're taking damage from a spell class you want to calculate in spell resistance. Now for physical damage it's just a simple damage reduction from what your defense is. And if it's something to do with spell casting, we want to deal with magic resist. Now magic resist both reduces the damage that is taken from magical spells, and there's also a lower percentage chance calculated into that spells will be resisted. It means it's pretty much like a dodge for spells, but it just means you resisted the spell. So I'm going to be teaching you guys how to set something like that up. I already went and pre-coded everything since this is a little more complex system and I wasn't used to setting up the way that it's set up. I thought it would be very basic and to where I could just add a extra variable in here from an int to a string, or two different slots for that, but it did not like that, and I did a little bit of research and I found out that I needed to create a actual class for this. So if you guys haven't created a class before, I've gone over this in my previous tutorials. For this one, we're going to be naming this damage info. And now it's just a simple JavaScript with that name. You want to make sure that that name matches your class name. So when you come in here, you want to create just a class and name it damage info. And we'll be creating our variables in here, which will be blank. And now what we want to do is create a constructor. Now a constructor is just a little addition here so that we can add the variables that we add in here to here, which will get plugged into there, and then we'll be able to access them. I know it's a little confusing, but this is just the way it's set up, and I will be going over everything else. So you just need to create this extra script that's a class, and you won't need to put that on any object, but we can actually reference it in our code. So for my send message, instead we're going to create a new damage info, open that up, and plug in our two items here. First one will be our int, next one will be our string. Now these are going to be two different types of spells, so I'll just name this off for you. So this is melee attack, just to make it easier for you guys, and this is our spell attack. And these are what our AI is going to be using for attacking our current player, or vice versa. We can change that up later, but we're just doing this for testing purposes. So I pretty much duplicated this code down here, changed that to Y, and for this I changed the attack for a little bit higher since it's a spell class. Since they're a little bit weaker, I want them to have a higher attack, and we'll name this spell. So this is the two different ways that we'll be able to tell if we're being attacked by a melee attack or a spell attack. And since we're going to be calculating all into one, it'll make it a lot easier when we're dividing it up into these categories. And that's for the reason why we need the class and we need this plugin here. And so what we're going to be doing is removing that variable we had before, and you can name this whatever you want. It's just going to be referencing damage info. So classes are pretty much the same as like a float, int. They're all pre-made classes that'll get plugged in. So this is our pre-made class, and so we can just name it whatever we want. But in order to reference it, it needs to be, we'll need to use that down here. So in our debug.log, I just put a simple damage spell type just to display what the spell type is that we're using. That way in our debug we can tell which one we are currently using. And now for this, so since melee is going to be using the dodge if we do get hit by a melee attack, we want to access damage right here, dot spell type. So in our class we have a spell type, and in here is where our spell type is. So whichever one we use, it gets plugged into all these different things, or it gets sent over, plugged into here, and we can reference that. So if the attack that we use, so if we use this attack, it's going to be a melee attack. So if that's a melee attack, we want to use our dodge feature here. And or else if we don't dodge, we want to damage. So we change that to damage.damage. And then let's see here. So we open that up there and we want to close it off over here after this else statement. And then we want to create our new else if. So else if the damage.spell type is a spell. So if we cast it as spell instead, we'll be using a spell. Right now we're not going to calculate in the different spell resist. I'm going to probably go over that in the next tutorial, how to set that up. And we'll probably be setting some other stuff up in there as well. But for now we just wanted to get this working and let you guys have enough time to get this set up before we move on to the next part. So that's pretty much all you need to set this up, and you just want to hit Control S to save it once you're done, and we can jump right in here. So we'll bring up our console. And if we hit T, it'll say melee, you dodge an attack. Melee, and we deal 17 damage. Melee, you dodge an attack. Melee, 15 damage. Melee, you dodge an attack. And so on. So it tells you what kind of attack you're using. So we're currently using a melee attack and we're dodging. So if we hit Y, you got hit by a spell. And each time it tells us we have a spell and you got hit by a spell, melee, dodge, or we got damaged. So that's pretty much the basic setup for now. I'll be teaching you guys later about some other stats we can calculate in here. But for now, that's the basic calculation for those two types of spells. Now later on, we'll still have to work in some other numbers and different variables in here for exactly what enemy we're attacking or whatnot. But that'll be vice versa. Since this is just our player and this isn't a online game and there's not multiple players the enemy's looking out for, we just need this set up. So this series is pretty much for a single player RPG. It sure can be turned into a multiplayer or online style RPG with the same code for scripting. But I'm just showing you guys a basic way to set that up. So stay tuned for part 3, which will probably be coming out soon. And yeah, leave down your comments if you want any other tutorials. I've been doing a little bit of thinking and maybe thinking of starting a mailing system since someone mentioned it before. So just in-game sending mail back and forth. And yeah, that's pretty much all I have for right now. And stay tuned, guys.